Welcome to Edward Resurrects History. Today, we're telling the complete history of America, from the very first humans to set foot on this continent all the way to 1950. Using AI trained on historical imagery and archaeological reconstruction, we can now see these eras as they may have actually looked. The birch-bark longhouses, the colonial harbor at dawn, the steel and smoke of a Gilded Age city rising from nothing. Let's go back to the very beginning. The land that will become the United States of America has never been empty. The first humans arrived somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago. Migrants from northeastern Asia crossing a land bridge where the Bering Strait now separates Russia from Alaska, following herds of megafauna into a continent no human being has ever set foot on before. They are not a single people. They are many, speaking different languages, adapting to wildly different landscapes, from Arctic tundra to temperate forest to desert canyon. The evidence for how early they arrived is still being debated. At Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, a shallow sandstone overhang 35 miles southwest of modern Pittsburgh, excavations begun in the 1970s uncovered an unbroken record of human habitation that may stretch back 19,000 years. By around 13,000 years ago, a distinctive technology spreads across the continent: the Clovis point, a beautifully crafted fluted stone tip attached to a spear, capable of bringing down mammoths, mastodons, and ground sloths that stand 3 meters at the shoulder. These animals will be gone within a few thousand years. Whether from hunting pressure, climate change, or both remains one of archaeology's open questions. But their passing marks a transition. With the megafauna gone, the cultures of North America diversify in spectacular ways, adapting to each region's specific resources and environment. In the lower Mississippi Valley, around 1700 BC, a people we call the Poverty Point culture construct an enormous earthwork complex in what is now northeastern Louisiana. 6 concentric semicircular ridges, large enough to house hundreds of people, centered on a plaza open to the river. It is one of the most sophisticated constructions in the Americas at the time, built by a hunter-gatherer society with no agriculture. Proof that the old assumption connecting monumental architecture exclusively to farming is simply wrong. Poverty Point draws in goods from across the continent: copper from the Great Lakes, stone from the Ouachita Mountains, galena from Missouri. It is a trading hub, a ceremonial center, built entirely from earth and labor. Then, beginning around 100 BC, another extraordinary culture takes root across the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys: the Hopewell tradition. The Hopewell people construct elaborate burial mounds of astonishing scale, filling them with objects sourced from across the entire continent: obsidian from the Yellowstone region, mica from the southern Appalachians, copper beaten into elaborate ceremonial shapes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico. Their trade network spans over 3,000 kilometers. By around 400 AD, this network collapses for reasons still debated, and a period of regional fragmentation follows. But the most stunning urban achievement of pre-contact North America is still to come. Around 1050 AD, across the Mississippi River from what is now St. Louis, something extraordinary happens. A modest agricultural village explodes in population and ambition within a single generation. Archaeologists call it Cahokia. At its peak, around 1100 AD, Cahokia covers 6 square miles, contains at least 120 earthen mounds, and houses somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people, rivaling the populations of London and Paris at exactly the same moment in time. At its center stands Monk's Mound, a terraced earthen pyramid covering 15 acres at its base, rising 30 meters into the sky, built entirely with hand-carried soil. Its base footprint matches the Great Pyramid of Giza. Cahokia has neighborhood planning, a central plaza, a remarkable timber circle aligned to the solstice that archaeologists call Woodhenge. Copper, shell, and ceramics arrive from hundreds of miles away. Then, By around 1350 AD, Cahokia is abandoned. Flooding, drought, deforestation, social collapse. The theories accumulate, but no single answer satisfies. Its inhabitants disperse into the surrounding landscape. No neighboring tribe preserves a clear memory of it. It simply disappears. And for centuries after European contact, when settlers encounter the mounds, many refuse to believe Native Americans built them. The true builders had been forgotten. Hundreds of kilometers to the southwest, around 1190 AD, a different civilization is at its architectural peak. And 23 ceremonial chambers built directly into a massive sandstone alcove in a canyon wall. It faces southwest, capturing winter sunlight for warmth while remaining shaded in summer. It is passive solar architecture, 800 years before the term existed. Around 1000 AD, a Norse expedition had already arrived on the northeastern coast. Leif Erikson makes landfall somewhere in Newfoundland, at a place he calls Vinland, complete with iron-working facilities. The Norse stay briefly, clash with the indigenous people they call Skraelings, and leave. Their visit leaves almost no lasting trace on the continent. History moves on without them. It is October 12, 1492, when everything changes. A Genoese navigator named Cristoforo Colombo, sailing under the Spanish crown, makes landfall in the Bahamas. He believes he has reached Asia. He has, in fact, initiated one of the most consequential collisions in human history. Within decades, Spanish expeditions are probing the Gulf Coast. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon lands in Florida, the first documented European contact with what will become the continental United States. In 1539, Hernando de Soto leads a brutal 4-year expedition from Florida through the southeast, crossing the Mississippi River in May of 1541, the first European to do so, leaving behind a trail of conflict and, far more lethally, disease. Smallpox, measles, and typhus, against which indigenous populations have no immunity, move faster than any army. Historians estimate that between 50 and 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas falls within a century of contact. The greatest demographic catastrophe in recorded human history, most of it invisible, unwitnessed by any European eye. In 1565, Spanish colonists establish St. Augustine on the Florida coast, the oldest continuously occupied European settlement within the borders of what will become the United States. 42 years later, on May 14, 1607, English settlers established Jamestown, Virginia, on a marshy peninsula in the James River. The early years are catastrophic. The winter of 1609 to 1610 becomes known as the Starving Time. Of the 500 colonists present in autumn, fewer than 60 are alive by spring. The settlement survives only through forced trade with the Powhatan Confederacy, then through the cultivation of tobacco, a crop that will make Virginia wealthy and plant the seeds of a labor system that will haunt the country for centuries. In August of 1619, two crucial and contradictory things happen in the same month at Jamestown. The first representative legislative assembly in North America convenes, the House of Burgesses, and a privateer ship arrives carrying the first documented enslaved Africans on English-American soil, roughly 20 people purchased by the colonists. On September 16, 1620, a ship called the Mayflower departs Plymouth, England, with 102 passengers. Religious separatists and secular colonists squeezed into a vessel roughly the size of a tennis court. After 66 days at sea in appalling conditions, they make landfall near modern Provincetown on November 21st. Before going ashore, 41 male passengers sign the Mayflower Compact, agreeing to govern themselves by the consent of the majority. It is an embryonic democratic document, born from necessity on a ship anchored in a November harbor. Puritan Massachusetts, Catholic Maryland, Quaker Pennsylvania, Dutch New Amsterdam, which the English seize in September of 1664 and rename New York. Each colony develops its own character, its own tensions. In 1675, those tensions reach a catastrophic peak when the Wampanoag leader Metacom, called King Philip by the English, launches a coordinated assault on colonial settlements across New England. King Philip's War lasts 14 months and is proportionally the deadliest conflict in American history. The Tea Act of 1773, each one tightening the grip, each one generating more resistance. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of colonists disguised as Mohawks dump 342 chests of East India Company tea into Boston Harbor. It is the morning of April 19, 1775. British regulars march out of Boston toward Lexington and Concord to seize colonial military supplies. By the time the British column retreats to Boston, 273 of them have been wounded or fallen. The American Revolutionary War has begun. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress formally adopts the Declaration of Independence, drafted principally by a 33-year-old Virginia lawyer named Thomas Jefferson. The contradiction between its declaration that all men are created equal and the reality of slavery, Jefferson himself enslaved over 600 people across his lifetime, is not lost on contemporary observers, and it will not be resolved for nearly 90 more years. The Revolutionary War ends with the Treaty of Paris, signed September 3, 1783. The United States of America is now a recognized sovereign nation. In the sweltering summer of 1787, 55 delegates gather in Philadelphia and produce, in 4 months of debate, the Constitution of the United States, still the oldest written national constitution in continuous use anywhere in the world. On April 30, 1789, George Washington is inaugurated as the first president in New York City. Then, on April 30, 1803, President Thomas Jefferson nearly doubles the size of the country in a single stroke, purchasing from Napoleon Bonaparte the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. It is arguably the greatest real estate transaction in history. In the spring of 1804, Jefferson dispatches Meriwether Lewis and William Clark westward to map this new acquisition. They return in September of 1806, having traveled nearly 13,000 kilometers, the first American citizens to cross the continent overland and return. What lies west is magnificent, and the young nation is already determined to possess it entirely. The ideology of manifest destiny, the belief that American expansion across the continent is divinely ordained, takes deep root. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signs the Indian Removal Act, forcing the relocation of dozens of indigenous nations from their ancestral territories east of the Mississippi. The Cherokee call their forced march of 1838 to 1839 Nunadol-Tsuni, the trail where they cried. Roughly 4,000 Cherokee, 1 in 4, do not survive the journey. By the 1840s, the United States stretches further still. The Mexican-American War, ending with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in February of 1848, delivers California, Nevada, Utah, and most of Arizona and New Mexico to the United States. 9 days before the treaty is signed, on January 24, 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall notices flakes of yellow metal in the mill race at Sutter's Mill in the Sierra Nevada foothills. The California Gold Rush begins. Within 2 years, California's non-Indigenous population jumps from roughly 14,000 to over 300,000, drawn from every continent on Earth. San Francisco transforms from a small port settlement into a boomtown of 30,000 virtually overnight. But the question that has haunted the Republic since its founding cannot be postponed much longer. By 1860, the United States is a nation of 31 million people, nearly 4 million of them enslaved. The election of Abraham Lincoln in November of 1860 triggers the secession of 7 southern states before he is even inaugurated. On April 12, 1861, Confederate artillery opens fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. The Civil War begins. 4 years later, after the bloodiest conflict in American history, 620,000 fallen on both sides, General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, on April 9, 1865. 5 days later, on the evening of April 14th, Abraham Lincoln is shot at Ford's Theater in Washington. He passes the following morning at 7:22 a.m. He is 56 years old. The decades after the war transform the country at a pace that seems almost geological in its scale. On May 10, 1869, at Promontory Summit in Utah, a golden spike is driven to complete the first transcontinental railroad, linking the Atlantic and Pacific coasts by rail for the first time. The journey from New York to San Francisco, which had taken months by wagon, now takes less than a week. In October of 1886, France presents the United States with a gift assembled in Paris and shipped across the Atlantic in 214 packing crates, the Statue of Liberty, dedicated on October 28, 1886. The 11 million immigrants who will pass through Ellis Island in the following decades will see her torch first. They arrive from everywhere, from Ireland and Germany and Italy and Poland and Russia and China and Greece, pressed together in steerage compartments, clutching documents in languages they hope someone on the other side can read. New York, by 1900, has 3.4 million people. Chicago, which in 1830 had fewer than 100 residents, has 1.7 million. The first steel-frame skyscraper, the Home Insurance Building in Chicago, rises in 1885. By the turn of the century, American steel production exceeds that of Britain and Germany combined. The industrial transformation is total, and it is violent. 14-hour workdays, child labor in coal mines, immigrant workers crammed into tenement blocks where sunlight never reaches the lower floors. On December 17, 1903, 2 bicycle mechanics from Dayton, Ohio, named Wilbur and Orville Wright, make 4 controlled powered flights at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the longest lasting 59 seconds. The age of flight has begun. Less than 5 years later, on October 1, 1908, Henry Ford introduces the Model T, designed not for the wealthy, but for the working American family, built on an assembly line so efficient the price drops year after year. By the early 1920s, more cars are registered in the United States than in the entire rest of the world combined. On April 6, 1917, the United States enters the First World War, sending 2 million soldiers to France. The war ends November 11, 1918. Then, on August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment is ratified. American women gain the right to vote 144 years after the Declaration declared all people equal. On October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, the New York Stock Exchange collapses. The Great Depression that follows is the worst economic catastrophe in American history. By 1933, 25% of the American workforce is unemployed. On the Great Plains, years of reckless farming combined with severe drought create the Dust Bowl. millions of tons of topsoil lifting into the sky in black blizzards visible from 300 kilometers away, displacing hundreds of thousands of families who load everything onto trucks and head west. Then comes Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. And everything this country has been: isolated, uncertain, exhausted from depression and drought, burns away in 90 minutes over a Hawaiian harbor. The mobilization that follows is unprecedented in human history. 16 million Americans serve in uniform. Factories that had been building cars are retooled within weeks to produce tanks and bombers. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, over 156,000 Allied troops cross the English Channel and storm the beaches of Normandy, the largest amphibious military operation ever conducted. By August of 1945, the war in Europe is over. Then, on August 6th, an American B-29 named Enola Gay drops a single weapon over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second falls on Nagasaki. The atomic age opens with a flash visible 160 kilometers away. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrenders. By 1950, the United States is a nation of 150 million people. The GI Bill is sending a generation of veterans to college. Suburbs are spreading from every major city. Televisions are appearing in living rooms. The economy is booming. And a cold rivalry with the Soviet Union is already redefining what it means to be the most powerful nation on Earth. The country that had been, just 15,000 years earlier, an unbroken wilderness traversed by the first humans to set foot on it, had built itself, layer by layer, into something that no one standing at the edge of that Bering land bridge could possibly have imagined. If this journey through the American story moved you the way it moves me every time I revisit it, then do the one thing no army, no depression, and no disaster in this entire video managed to stop. Press that subscribe button and keep this channel growing. I'm Edward, and I want to know, what historical event should I resurrect next? Let me know in the comments.